Hello, I am Eddie O'Sullivan, and this is This Week in the Italian Campaign. In This Week in the Italian Campaign, brought to you by the Freedom for Italy Network. Episode 48, The Capture of Florence. By the start of August, the Allied front line extended from the mouth of the River Arno south of Pisa to Senigallia on the Adriatic coast. On the 8th Army front in the centre of Italy on the 4th of August, units of 2 New Zealand Division and 6th South African Armoured Division entered the outskirts of Florence south of the Arno. They discovered all Arno bridges had been destroyed except the 14th century Ponte Vecchio in the heart of old Florence. Houses had been demolished in such a way as to block approaches at both its ends. On the evening of the 5th, the 2nd Canadian Brigade took over the New Zealand Division's sector of the now almost static front. The next night, on their right, the 1st Canadian Brigade relieved the South African Armoured Division. The New Zealand Division was shifted to the left to allow the 8th Indian Division to pass into reserve. The Canadians faced the Arno on a 10-mile front. The 1st Brigade's sector included the triangular portion of Florence which lay south of the river. The German garrison, comprising 3 battalions of the 4th Parachute Division, still controlled 90% of the city. Allied Force Headquarters had ruled that the whole city of Florence must rank as a work of art of the first importance. The Canadians were using only their rifles and machine guns. The firing of anti-tank Piats and mortars in the built-up area had been forbidden. The Royal Canadian Regiment holding the waterfront east and west of the Ponte Vecchio suffered casualties from civilian snipers and mortaring and shelling. To end this practice, a force of 250 Italian partisans with Canadian infantry combed the south bank on the 8th of August. They rounded up more than 150 suspects and enough rifles, pistols and hand grenades to fill 2 trucks. The Canadian stay in Florence ended on the 8th of August. That evening they were relieved by the 8th Indian Division and moved 30 miles south to near Siena. By nightfall on the 10th, the division had rejoined the 1st Canadian Corps in the Perugia-Foligno area. On the withdrawal of the Canadian infantry from Florence, the Ontario Regiment reverted to the command of the 8th Indian Division. During the night of the 10th of August, the last elements of the 4th Parachute Division withdrew across the Mugnone Canal into Florence's northern suburbs. At daybreak on the 11th of August, white flags were flying along the Arno. They signalled the Germans had gone. Infantry of the 8th Indian Division and the 1st British Division on its right crossed the river and began organising the movement of food, medical supplies and water to the starving population in the main part of the city. The opening of the Ponte Vecchio to jeeps on the 14th of August eased the problems of supply. The next day, the Royal Engineers completed a Class 30 Bailey Bridge on the piers of the demolished Ponte Santa Trinita, 300 yards downstream. On the afternoon of the 10th of August, a meeting was held at 8th Army's headquarters involving Commander-in-Chief Harold Alexander, 8th Army Commander Oliver Leese, and 5th Army Commander Mark Clark to finalise plans for Operation Olive, the Allied attack on the Gothic Line. Alexander confirmed that the main Allied attack by the 5th Army on the eastern end of the Gothic Line would start on the 25th of August. That would precede the attack by the 5th Army and 13th Corps in the Florence area to punch through the northern Apennines to Modena, northwest of Bologna, and link up with the 8th Army advancing from the Adriatic. General Lee said that he planned to make 10th Corps Commander Richard McCreary a provisional commander for both 10th Corps and 13th Corps, which was commanded by Sidney Kirkman and comprised the 1st British Infantry Division, the 6th British and 6th South African Armoured Divisions, the 8th Indian Division and the 1st Canadian Tank Brigade. Command of 13 Corps, however, would pass to the 5th Army for the initial phases of the attack on the Gothic line, while 10 Corps would continue to be directed by Lise. Operation Olive was to be the largest set-piece battle of the Italian campaign since the final assault on the Gustav Line in May, and would involve a total of 1.2 million men on both sides. By this time, the complex process of reordering the 8th Army's order of battle was underway. 5 Corps, commanded by General Charles Keighley, which had been relieved by 2 Polish corps in June, now comprised 4th Infantry Division, which had been transferred from 13 Corps, and was joined by Britain's 46th and 56th Divisions. The Canadian Corps was being prepared to move from the centre of Italy to the Adriatic. The 5th Army, which had been weakened by the departure of the French Expeditionary Corps for the invasion of southern France, completed the relief of its front-line formations. The Brazilian Expeditionary Corps, which landed in Naples beginning on the 16th of July, was placed under 5th Army's command. The 370th Regiment of the African-American 92nd Division was expected to join the 5th Army under command of the 1st Armoured Division in time to join its assault on the Gothic line. Well, that takes us up to the first week of August, and there you heard that Florence was captured by the 8th Army without much fighting, and the city itself was not seriously damaged. This was a decision made by both sides not to turn Florence into a ruin. And so the ground is being laid for the Operation Olive, which was to start on the 25th of August, which was a major assault on the Adriatic coast by the 8th Army. Now we'll be dealing with that. Preparations for that next week. And we'll be investigating the issues that were coming up. So that's it this week from This Week in the Italian Campaign. We'll be back next week with another episode. So until then, from everybody here, it's goodbye, good luck, and may God bless you all.